Good morning and welcome to episode 73 of Duval Rundown. My name is Gus Logue. Today I'm joined, as I am each Tuesday, by Hays Carlyon of The Franchi Show, which you can catch on 1010XL 92.5 FM from 4 to 6 each weekday. It's going to be some really good episodes or just Franchi shows this week because Frank and Hays are both in Indianapolis for the NFL Combine. So maybe we can prep that a little bit. But Hays is joining me today to talk about James Gladstone's introductory press conference yesterday. He was announced as the Jaguars' sixth general manager in franchise history on Friday, and then his opening presser was Monday. He's also slated to speak again on Tuesday, so later today at the NFL Combine. But again, we're going to go over just some of our biggest takeaways from his first media interactions in Jacksonville. So Hays, welcome back to the show. How's it going? How's the weather up there in Indy so far?
It's actually really nice.
Yeah.
Surprisingly, it's probably the warmest combine that I've ever been to. The weather is like low 50s is the high. So, it's there's a little bit of snow on the ground from last week. They had a really bad weather week, but right now it's nice out. So hopefully we've caught a break here. And but yeah, it's great to be here, and it'll be a fun week. I mean, this is a kind of an era of discovery for us with this new Jaguars leadership, and it's what we've yearned for: something new, something different, something exciting, something that we know isn't bound to fail. And now I think we at least have that, and it's going to be fun getting to know James Gladstone and Liam Cohen better. Obviously, we got you guys got a chance yesterday. Frank and I were already flying up here, so I wasn't at the press conference yesterday and just watched it online. But, yesterday was a good kind of a welcoming, tell us a little bit about you, your background, things like that. And now today we can spin it forward a little bit with some more specific items that, we know the fans want to know about. How does James Gladstone and Liam Cohen feel about Christian Kirk? Is he going to be a part of this thing? What about Evan Ingram? How do they feel about their salary cap space, and how active can they be in free agency? I mean, we know James is excited about the draft capital. He talked about that the Jaguars have as much draft capital as any team in the league over the next 2 years with 20 total picks. He talked about how his experience with the Rams being in that situation where they had 24 over a 2-year period, how that makes him uniquely qualified for this. So, yeah, I mean, it's an exciting time, but now, you'd like to start getting to a little bit more of the nuts and bolts of how they're going to construct this thing.
Yeah, it's definitely the same for all general managers across all sports, really. It's less about the words they say and more about the actions that they take, where you can really learn about who they are as a general manager and what moves they're trying to make to build the team. But with that said, I think we obviously can learn a lot from what James said yesterday, since it was his first media availability as Jaguars general manager. The thing that stood out to me most was him answering a question about his philosophy of player identification, specifically in terms of who to bring into the building. And his answer was, I think it's pretty simple from my perspective. We will prioritize people and players that are intangibly rich. And by doing so, they will elevate our system, our team, by being nothing more than themselves. It's as simple as that. So I think that's definitely something that he took away from Les Snead and the Rams, because he talked about how Les was just unapologetically himself and wanted that for everyone that he came across, let alone worked with. James also, if anyone saw the video that Jaguars social media put out of him meeting coaches a couple of days ago, he had kind of the same message for them, where it's about bringing in high character people, and by them being nothing but their authentic selves, they'll kind of immediately or just naturally raise the ecosystem and the culture within the building. And so I thought that was good to hear, because I thought that really throughout the press conference, a lot of his answers, I think, were probably answers that he had prepared for his interviews to be a general manager. I'm sure he got a little bit of prep from Jags PR in terms of like how to answer questions from media. But again, I feel like we got a lot of really good answers because he was just in job interviews. So a lot of his true feelings about the job and where he's been and where he's going to go, I think we're, I don't know, truthful. And so what other takeaways do you have, Hays, or if not takeaways, what questions do you have for him moving forward?
One thing that I thought was cool to hear is he and Liam Cohen aren't like best friends. This was not a, hey, Shad, I want you to go hire my good friend out in LA. I thought it was really interesting. I would have thought they would have had a little bit more of a connection, but James made it pretty clear that we really didn't interact a whole lot. We certainly never had conversations about, hey, one day I'm going to be the GM and you're going to be the coach. And,
right.
And we know that exists across this league, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's just, but I like the fact that it was a merit-based hire. It wasn't Liam Cohen, who's an inexperienced first-time head coach, going and saying, hey, go hire my buddy because I like him. And, I'll get along well with him. And so it's good that they have a shared background and they come from, or they've worked for the same organization. But I like the fact that they weren't overly close, if that makes sense. So, I think that was something that, kind of perked my ear up of, okay, well, good. I'm glad that they're familiar with each other. I'm glad they have that McVay, Les Snead kind of shared philosophy on things, but I'm glad they're not like best friends, because then I would have had some doubt over, was this really the best candidate? So I thought that was really interesting, to hear him talk about that. It was interesting to hear Liam talk about his, inner workings with James with the Rams. And he kind of echoed that. He was like, yeah, we didn't really work together on much, but the stuff that we did work on, the undrafted portion, he was like, I've never seen a front office person be able to effectively communicate to coaches, what we're looking for, what he's looking for, who's out there, how that matches up, as well as James did. So it's good that they have, I think, a shared history, but they're not like buddy, and that's why James Gladstone's the Jaguars GM.
Yeah, James has a lot of years of experience leading draft meetings too. Apparently, even in meetings where Les Snead was in the room, he was still doing a lot of the kind of conducting and just being in charge of meetings and getting everyone to voice their opinions about disagreements about certain prospects and things like that. I think it's also a good point in terms of like Tony Baselli didn't hire any of like his friends because he arguably has Shad Khan's ear the most out of anyone in that football leadership unit. And so the fact that Baselli didn't immediately just like hire someone that he was familiar with, I think also is certainly a good sign. And speaking of Baselli, I thought he had a really interesting answer because Mark Long had a very Mark Long question and said that collaboration is a great buzzword, but the last three staffs that were here, Mark Long said have pointed fingers like he had never seen in my life before. Why is it going to be different? And Baselli said, oh, that's like in the past. We're not worried about the past. We're worried about the future. And we're worried about like building relationships built on trust. And as long as we have that and are letting go of our egos and we're all just focused on putting a winning product on the field, we'll be fine. And so I agree that like, as long as they're winning, I think that we'll be fine in terms of the fact that James Gladstone, Liam Cohen, and Tony Baselli are all reporting to Shad Khan, as opposed to having one guy like a Tom Coughlin being the guy, or even a Trent Baalke being the guy to make final decisions. So my question for you, Hays, is who do you think is the quote-unquote final decision maker, even though there is an official one? And are you worried about this kind of setup of checks and balances? Because again, if they're winning, then it's going to be great and there will be no concerns. But as soon as they start losing and as soon as adversity hits, then crap could hit the fan pretty quick.
Yeah, I mean, and that's another thing that today, hopefully, we can get a clear answer on is who has control over the 53. I'm pretty sure I know the answer. I'm pretty sure it's Liam Cohen because he's making $12 million a year, whatever it is. And trust me, James Gladstone is not close to that. So, I think, follow the money in terms of that. And my guess is, and we know it's not Baselli. He's made that clear that he's not picking players and things like that. He's going to lend a voice, and he might, he might be needed if there's a little bit of a conflict between Gladstone and Cohen over a player. But I think it's going to be Liam Cohen. I mean, I think that I think that was the model Shad was looking for. Again, I find it ironic. No one wanted to hire Bill Belichick for the control that he was after. And ironically, the Jaguars ended up giving it to a 39-year-old who's never been a head coach in the NFL. That may work great. And the good news is, if Liam Cohen works out great, he could be the coach here for 15, 20 years and go on a Harbaugh, Tomlin, kind of run. And obviously you weren't going to have that with Bill, but, being in his already, not well into, but into his 70s. So, but yeah, I think it's Liam Cohen's show. But we, you'd like that on the record. And so, we'll certainly, try to get that figured out today. But I can't imagine it's not Liam Cohen, just because of all the things the Jaguars did, all the things Shad Khan did to secure him as head coach. And again, James Gladstone is a first-time GM too. So I wouldn't expect that James Gladstone in an interview really brought up, I need final say or anything like that. I mean, this is a massive promotion for him. I'm sure it's, while he's not probably making crazy Liam Cohen money, I'm sure he's making considerably more than he was making as being one of Les Snead's lieutenants in LA. So, that's certainly up there in terms of figuring that out. And again, I think fans have a right to know that. I mean, that famous phrase, the buck stops here. Well, the fans need to know, where does the buck stop in Jacksonville? Where does it stop with the Jaguars? And, and I think it's Liam Cohen, but again, I don't want to think, I want to be told, yes, it's me. If we get to a point where a decision has to be made and the room is split, I'm the one making the final call.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see whether they do decide to kind of make that information public, because I think they would potentially try to be discreet in order to not cause a lot of friction. But we saw just last year and really the past 2 years with Doug Peterson, how he was really being discreet about who the play caller was between him and Press Taylor, and the fact that it was like such a murky situation and Doug was never clarifying it, just ended up causing more friction and ended up being worse in terms of at least PR. And so that'll definitely be something to monitor. I think
they'd be making a mistake, not to your point. I think they'd be making a mistake not to acknowledge it, because you're going to be asked about it all the time until you reveal it, like with the play calling. And really, what does it hurt? I mean, the PR answer to that is, if you're Liam Cohen, if he's asked it, is, well, I have it, but I don't think it's ever really going to come to that. I mean, we're in alignment. We see things the same way. Certainly, we're not going to agree on every player. But I also don't think, we're going to be so dug in on that player that, there's going to be this friction in the room. There's so many players that you just move on to a player that you both like. So that would be kind of what, my advice would be, but they need to answer the question. I mean, that's not something that an NFL organization should keep from its fan base.
Absolutely. The final lingering question that I have after his introductory press conference on Monday, James Gladstone's, is what he does with all that draft capital. Because as you mentioned, 24 draft picks over the next 2 years, the most out of any NFL team. The Rams, I think in the past 2 years, had 24 picks themselves. If it wasn't exactly 24, then it was definitely up there in that range.
That's what he said, 24.
Yeah, and so I'm interested to see, I guess my question is whether the Jaguars will end up with more draft picks or less draft picks than the 24 they're currently projected to actually have and spend, because the Rams have been pretty aggressive with their draft picks. They made a pretty aggressive trade up in the second round last year for Braden Fisk. Obviously, they've used plenty of first rounders to go out and acquire Pro Bowl caliber players. And so I'm interested in whether those 24 picks are going to end up being closer to like 18 or 20, or if Gladstone is going to view the roster as like maybe needing a little bit more rebuilding and retooling. And so maybe he does a little bit more trading back and adds more kind of swings to the plate. And so, because I think that as much as I personally am interested in free agency, I don't think that the team's actions during free agency will tell us a whole lot, because free agency, it's like, are you a contender or are you not a contender? Because if you're not, you're usually desperate enough to add talent to your roster to overpay guys just to get them into the building and, again, add more talent to your roster. And then if you're a contender, then your roster is fairly set, and so you're able to wait until like the second, third, and fourth waves of free agency when you can really go bargain shopping and add discounted talent to your already ready championship like ready roster essentially. And so again, like I think that if free agency is kind of divvied up into those two buckets, if you got to be binary, but the draft really I think is going to be the biggest indication of like in terms of Gladstone and the team's actions, just how they view the roster, how they view team building and the draft in general. So I think we'll get a lot of answers in that regard in the future in April. And so
yeah, and I think they could. I think they could do both. I think they could trade out of 5 and come back a few two spots, 4 spots, something like that. And then I think you could then they'd be adding picks, obviously. But then I think to your point, they could be aggressive going back up, whether that's back into the second round or, maybe parlaying those 2/3 to go up high, maybe to get in the back half of the second, something like that. So it could be 2 moves. It could be trade back, add some picks, but then, on day 2, you make a move to go up. Obviously, they don't have to go up too far in the second round. They're right there. But if they wanted to get back into the second round, they've got the 2/3 plus whatever ammunition they would have gotten from trading back at their disposal to make something happen there. So it may end up being 20 picks with 2 trades. One in which you added some compensation and one in which you gave a couple picks back. But I would think that, and again, who knows how they'll evaluate the talent that they're taking over. I did a 53 last week just for fun. I didn't publish it or anything, but just trying to get a sense of the roster. And I came up with 39 guys that I think are going to be on the team. Guys that have done at least enough, to warrant another year of employment. And so if you're at 39, we know that and that includes the 3 specialists, obviously. But so if you're at 39, you don't really have a ton of room because, 46 through 53, that's a constant churn. That's those aren't guys that have to be part of the long-term plan. Those are guys that are just sort of hanging on. They're inactives, they're special teams guys. So I look at it as I really think they only have room for maybe 6 impactful players. So, I mean, again, and they could feel different about it. They could say 39 is way too high of a number. I just am going off of guys that are cheap, rookie contracts that the franchise has invested something in, or guys that have played well enough that obviously you wouldn't move on from them. And I have Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram included in that 39. I do not have Sheriff or Cisco. I think in looking at it, to me, it's not a massive need here in terms of they need to bring in 25 new guys. They'll sign a couple free agents, I would think, probably to try and hide need in the draft. So I would think guard, safety, second corner could all be things that you see in free agency, not necessarily at crazy money, but at least a placeholder for if the draft doesn't fall the way we want, we've got what we believe to be an upgraded veteran over what's there now. And then, and then again, that was something that, again, not everything Trent Baalke did was bad. And in fact, a lot of his management of the roster was fine. It's just the way he went about his business that was deconstructive to the element of winning. But that is something that, they have done a pretty good job of in the past, of signing some guys in free agency so that when you get to the draft, it's not like, well, obviously you've got to go here because you've got a chasm at that position on the depth chart. So, if they sign 3 or 4 free agents that are, I'd say, B-level guys, you've got 10 picks. So, I think they have the ammunition that they need. But again, a lot of that depends on how they feel about the talent that they're taking over. But I will say of the guys that I kept, I think it'd be a hard argument to say, no, that player is going to get released.
Yeah, that all makes a lot of sense. Definitely the general rule of thumb is sign for needs and free agency and then draft for wants in April. Definitely don't want to be pigeonholed into having to take a certain position once the first round comes around. So that'll do it for this episode, though. Hays, thanks so much. Next week, we said we were going to talk about Garrett Wilson this week, but there's obviously a lot going on. So maybe next week we'll talk about Garrett Wilson and just potential trades with the number 5 overall pick, even though I think we would both say we do not expect that to happen at all. Certainly there's a non-zero chance, and so we could think of some fun hypotheticals for that. But Hays, as always, thanks so much for joining the show. Have a good time in Indianapolis, and we'll see you here next week.
All right. Thank you, Gus. Take care.
All righty. Thanks again, Hays. Thanks, everyone, for watching, hanging out, and commenting. And we'll be back here at 9:04 a.m. I got Arif Hassan for tomorrow's episode. He was supposed to come on last week, but to no fault of his own, he wasn't able to make it. But Arif, who covers the Vikings for his website, wideleft.football, will be on tomorrow at 9:04 to talk a little bit about Grant Udinski, the Jaguars' new offense coordinator. Just looking forward to that. And then Thursday, Mia will be talk about what she's learned, nuggets from Indianapolis, the NFL Combine. That'll definitely be a good show too, so watch out for that. And yeah, that'll do it. Thank you guys. And game on.